Thank you, Robert. We are excited to have you join us for today's conversation about the challenges and the opportunities of transitioning your operations to agent native. My name is Sven Bergstrom, and I lead the insurance business for Celonis in North America. And with me here today is Eric Severinghaus. Eric, please introduce yourself.
Ben, excited to be here with you, brother. My name is Eric Severinghaus. I am the co-founder and CEO of Bloomfilter. We're the process and context layer for the software development lifecycle, and we are fortunate to be able to partner with a great company like Celonis to power the Celonis for the software development lifecycle offering. And we're going to be talking all about how we do that with agent mining and all kinds of fun stuff here over the course of the next 45 minutes.
Excellent. So let's talk about transforming to agent native. Eric and I have been having these conversations a lot lately with CIOs and CTOs at a large number of large enterprise organizations. And what has consistently emerged is that this is a destination that almost all CIOs and CTOs are committed to. This is no longer an optional journey. This is something that everybody has to find a way to navigate. The second thing that is emerging is that they're on the question of how do I transition? A blueprint is emerging. And it really starts with making the process observable and moving beyond the KPIs. That really means understanding how work gets done across the different systems that are instrumenting your SDLC and being able to identify the work behavior patterns that underlie the KPIs. That really is table stakes. It is something that Celonis with our process intelligence platform does world class. Once this baseline is established, the number one thing, Eric, that you and I keep hearing from our customers and our prospective customers is, all right, I have a future state vision for how the human agent interaction should work along the process. I have this documented. Maybe I hired Accenture or McKinsey to actually map this out. Now I want to be able to see how are my teams and my individual developers conforming to this new model? How are they adopting the tools that they are given? How are they inserting these agentic assist elements into the workflow? And for that, they need really this ability to drive an operating model shift through adherence intelligence. Maybe, Eric, let me tag you in. Color this out a bit more for the audience.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly right. I mean, Spanish, as you said, we're kind of having this conversation on repeat right now, right? And it kind of keeps being the same thing. A CIO, a CTO is sort of volunteering, sort of being voluntold to their board and their executive team. Hey, this is how we're going to go drive like a 30% improvement in productivity over the course of the next 18 months. And then the question becomes like, okay, great, 30% compared to what, right? And this is where the challenge comes in of like, oftentimes it's challenging to quantify the output within an organization as it exists right now. And so you say, okay, well, let's go make it 30% better. Well, we need to understand like what's the baseline that we're going to improve from. We need to understand who's using the tools, how are they using them, and where are we getting ROI from? And so these same questions just keep popping up like time and again on repeat. And it really comes down to this classic question of, do we understand what's happening in the process? Do we understand what the humans are doing? Do we understand what the agents are doing? And do we understand how they're working together?
Yep, that is the repeatable story that we are hearing consistently. So really, to recap, there are three horizons that the journey seems to be unfolding with. First one is to make the process observable, move beyond the one-dimensional KPIs, be able to conformance check how people are doing work today, how they're doing work tomorrow against those future state standards that you're defining. And then once you have this working in near real time, using the modern technologies that are available to really kind of orchestrate some of this process in near real time, you can actually get to that third horizon, which is this autonomous process optimization, where you are continuously improving, based on intelligent process signals that are coming out. So this is where the market is looking to go. This is where we are looking to instrument the market with a leading edge capability. But let's kind of back this up for a second and talk about why are so many AI investments failing right now? Because obviously many people are investing into this journey, but there's a real challenge that is consistently popping up, and there are really kind of two colors to this that we're showing here. The first one is, and it goes back to what Eric said, which is you're making these investments, but are you able to actually understand the baseline against which you're trying to improve? Are you able to see, what is the attributed impact of these investments? And in the case of Uber, there's a recent article that was released that suggests that maybe it's not quite as clear cut, in terms of being able to reconcile the return on investment on these new tools and capabilities are being introduced. The
Yeah,
second piece. Go ahead, Eric.
sorry, I was just going to add a little color commentary here. Anybody who's ever managed engineers knows that there's nothing that an engineer is better at than goal seeking and optimizing to, winning a game or executing on measures once they understand those measures, right? And what we see, publicly reported at both Uber and Amazon in recent popular press articles, and what we're seeing confidentially across a number of customers is this same behavior take place where the first thing that developers are being told is, hey, go use AI and we're going to measure you and we're going to rate you and rank you on how much you're using AI, not how well, but how much. And what happens if you tell goal seeking engineers and goal optimizing engineers that you're going to metric them on how much AI they're using? Well, they start using a lot of AI, right? And we're seeing this where in some cases, this is 3 to 4 times the annual salary of very expensive people being burned on tokens. Again, popular press articles referencing that oftentimes the AI work may or may not even be directly relevant to, the explicit tasks. So they might be using AI to do all kinds of other things just to burn tokens. It really speaks to understanding not just who's using AI, but how are they using it, and then ultimately, like the amount of money that can be lost if you say, let's just get people using it, and then we'll figure out what the value is. You can burn through a tremendous amount of cash very, very quickly if you don't have observability into how is this impacting cycle time, rework rate, and some of these other kinds of things.
Yeah, and Eric, it's really interesting how in many of these conversations we have Uber here as a case study on the slide, but we're also basically finding great acceptance of this notion that we are kind of in the Uber 1.0 phase of the token cost. They're not really reflecting the true market price right now, just like the Uber rides were exceedingly cheap when we first started using it. Now they have come up in price and are more reflective of the true cost. And so as token costs normalize to market standards, the ability to control and make the efficient use optimal is going to be really important. And why are we keep referencing
Yeah,
this?
Sven, I just want to add one other quick point to that, man. Like these LLMs are getting ready to go public, right? As anybody who reads the Wall Street Journal understands, the unit economics of the LLMs are going to come under pressure pretty quickly around those token costs. And so I think the idea of, tokens 3 and 4xing in cost in the next 12 to 24 months, not the next 5 years, is something that we all as technology leaders need to be planning.
Yep. And we talk a lot about currently the SDLC process, the software development lifecycle process. And we mentioned earlier on that there's a pretty consistent board to C-level to executive leaders on down mandate to instrument that process as an early adopter with these new capabilities. 30% capacity improvements are not an uncommon objective that these executives are given, while also improving code quality, consistency, and overall speed to market. And on the right side, you can see that there is this notion of being able to transform a large number of developers, from current ways of working to the future state of working, is a challenge. And the limited visibility into the tool adoption and the outcomes that can be attributed to those new capabilities is simply not there in these current state KPI reports. It also lacks kind of the actionable intelligence on what needs to change, like who needs to change the way they prompt the AI, who needs to change when they trigger the agentic work. There's all kinds of elements to drive change that is currently not instrumented with any real information and intelligence. And one of the reasons for that is that there is a large number of fragmented tooling in these environments. We have customers that are discussing how they have 15 plus instances of ADO, multiple systems for Jira, 15 plus agentic development tools across their teams. Now that may not be you. You might have a smaller number, but the fragmentation challenge is real for virtually everybody, which makes the reporting across these end-to-end processes for SDLC very, very challenging. That's the opportunity, as a matter of fact, also, right? So this is the challenge, but the way that we look at this and what we have developed is really the opportunity to unlock this trap value. And on this slide here, this is when we first saw this, it really kind of drove home the mission purpose that Bloomfilter really kind of has as a company, which was to take process intelligence through the Celonis platform and enrich it and infuse it with their SDLC expertise. You can see on the left side the number of agents that are being deployed in development, in coding, versus the rest of functional business operations is a large factor, over anything else. And the money that is flowing into the enterprise AI right now for development and coding is a large graph of volume. So Eric, any words on this?
Yeah, I'm reminded here a little bit of like a couple of years ago, Jamie Dimon said JP Morgan Chase is really a software company that happens to have bank branches. And to a first approximation, this slide came from Andreessen Horowitz, and Andreessen is famous. Mark Andreessen is famous for saying software is eating the world. Over the course of the last 10 years, it seems like almost every company in some way, shape, or form has become a software company at heart. And just in various different businesses. And what we're now seeing is that is transforming into every company, no matter what role or what capacity, investing heavily around AI, and the vast majority of that investment being in the software development lifecycle use case. And so where we as an industry want to facilitate that transformation and understand how do we drive the integration between the carbon and the silicon life forms, how do we drive human and agentic hybrid processes, it really starts with getting the SDLC right. And that's where we're seeing a huge opportunity.
Yep. And that's really the recommendation that as the insurance leader here at Celonis that we are taking to our target market and customers is apply this process intelligence with SDLC infused IP to the process that is currently the single biggest early adopter element within your organization. CIOs and CTOs need to be able to prove that they can self-adopt this capability before they, in our mind, can effectively roll this out into a claims organization or an underwriting organization or the finance organization. Right now, the single biggest target to infuse is the software development lifecycle process. And from here, maybe Eric, there are also some questions that we are consistently hearing. Maybe take a moment to to share with the audience what we're hearing as some of the questions that we are consistently answering.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty simple. Like, what are the humans and the agents doing? How are they working together? Who's using agents? Can we prove that it's working? Can we prove that we're getting ROI? And just because we got it working with a small team, how do we make that happen at scale? You know, if we've got 9,000 developers, we've got 20,000 developers, we've got 30,000 developers. We're looking across a fragmented tool chain with incomplete observability. And we're looking at how do we transform and change manage that scale of an organization, typically in 12 to 18 months, right? These are not trivial undertakings. These are big opportunities, and so these are the kinds of questions that we're seeing in terms of how do we adopt it in enterprise scale.
Yeah, and I think what we're also seeing is that the answer to these questions, cannot be a bunch of bespoke, manual, consulting intensive projects, right? Like this needs to be solved with its own set of technologies. It needs to be instrumented in a way where it becomes automated, continuously refreshing, and adaptable to changes. So one of the things we mentioned earlier is that people are setting these future targeted or target human agent operating models for their processes, and they may have a McKinsey that helps design them, or an Accenture, or some other subject matter expert. But one thing that's clear is that these future state target models, they will evolve as well. And so you really need to be able to continuously flex the ability to look at the as is and then compare that to where you're trying to go over time. So this is a journey, and I think that's one of the key words here is that the journey has multiple different dimensions, and one of the dimensions we believe is the technology that we provide. And Eric, I think this might be the transition for us to talk a bit more about our actual solution before we get into the show and tell. So I'm going to transition over into the next phase.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know I need to hit this quick, Rob. So otherwise, I know he's going to come in and tell me to speed up. So the we've laid out the problem, we've laid out the opportunity. Let's frame up, what we're seeing be the big unlock for customers here. And really what it comes down to is making sure that we've got the right layers of the taxonomy in terms of the right solution set. What we see here is a basic level architecture of what we think is best practice for complex AI deployments at enterprise scale. And at the bottom, you've got, the core foundation in terms of your enterprise architecture, cloud-based hyperscalers, et cetera. On top of that, you've got the various different systems that are being used, the kind of low-level systems, be that systems of record like Jira, GitHub, Jenkins, GitHub, et cetera, Microsoft ADO, as well as fundamental LLMs. And then there's an integration layer, and what we then get into is the process intelligence and observability layer, which we think is really key to making this whole thing work. This is where we create the digital twin of the process, that becomes basically the context, not only to understand what the agents and humans are doing together, but also to provide better data, better understanding, process optimization to both the agents and the humans. And so on top of that, you get your agentic core, and then you get the ability to query this and in a variety of different user interfaces, and ultimately be able to understand what's happening. And we sort of lay this out in terms of a bunch of KPIs, but what I'll show you in the demonstration is not only KPIs, but the ability to kind of lay it out in a way that's agentic native, and that ultimately allows us to query this in natural language, as well as to look through kind of classic dashboards. So with that, with no further ado, let me show you guys a little bit of what we have built here. That
And I
we
think
and
it's
our
important,
customer,
Eric, as you're
yeah,
pulling it
please.
up. So this is a packaged solution offering that already reflects the intellectual property that Bloomfilter has codified and packaged for market.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, Sven. This is a context layer that sits at that sort of space that I was talking about. There's always some customization to a given customer's processes and tools. But at the end of the day, you're exactly right. It's a set of repeatable, usable intellectual property that we've developed that allows us to get to this very quickly and scalably. Um, Oftentimes so the hard work comes in terms of pulling the data model together. And we typically pull these logs together and we pull this data together either through operational data integrations into systems like Jira, GitHub, so we can connect through an API. We can also connect through, if you're pushing the logs into a system like Databricks, we can pull it out of there. And then there's overlaying the sort of systems of record with the agentic systems. So we've got a set of open source plugins into tools like Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, et cetera, that allow us to mine the agentic context and what's happening within the agents. And so ultimately what this then allows us to do is we can, once we've got that context model built that I was showing you, we can then query this in a whole bunch of different ways. So if I want to ask, like, how are my teams adopting AI? We can look team by team. We can understand the adoption rate. We can understand the cost that's taking place. We can understand how often this is happening, et cetera. We can break this down by different tools and we can show kind of where tools are being used. We can break this down by a monthly adoption trend. This is just some kind of toy demo data that's in here, but we can then start to understand what is the AI versus non-AI cycle time. So how is AI actually impacting cycle time? And if we want to go a level deeper into this, we want to understand which of the cycle times are most impacted by AI. We can ultimately do this by sort of breaking this down in a whole bunch of different ways. Now, what we oftentimes then see a customer want to do is, okay, great, it's fantastic that I can pull this off and I can sort of ask this within a question of my agent. But then I also want to be able to do this. I want to be able to look at this and query this in sort of classic dashboards in a more deterministic way that I might be more used to. And so um, we have the ability to do this as well. So again, we can query it through that natural language stream. We can also pull up this data to be able to show a whole bunch of different things that customers typically going to want to see. As we talked about, a customer is usually going to have some sort of like a bronze, silver, gold, or some modality that they're sort of looking at their different teams in. And they're going to want to understand things like which of their teams are doing the best job of adopting agents as they build specifications or as they get into developing code. They may want to understand, and this is where we can do some really cool stuff around process mining or sentiment mining, how well the interactions between the humans and the agents are actually going. So we can understand, like, are the agents and the humans working well together? Are they saying nice things together? Are they fighting with each other? This can be a really interesting kind of predictor of the value of a lot of what's going to end up coming from the agents and the humans working together. And then
And
where this
Eric,
is,
if I can cut
yeah,
in for a
please.
second, one of the
Absolutely.
things we talked earlier about the cost of tokens, and if you're not able to really reconcile if there are repeat prompts by developers to Claude Code to get the line of code output that you're seeking, if that developer needs three or four different prompts to kind of get the answer, your cost is effectively 3 to 4x of what it should be in the most efficient manner. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's exactly right. And Sven, I think all this is going to become even more interesting as the cost of tokens sort of inevitably rises over the course of the next couple of years. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in the context layer as sort of a caching and deterministic analysis layer, right? Because absent this sort of process context, then everything is being done probabilistically in these like really, really expensive calculations by the LLM. And so we're already seeing some of our most sophisticated customers starting to ask us like, hey, if you've got all this process intelligence and you're understanding all of this process flow, can we use this basically as a deterministic caching layer to actually make our LLMs more efficient? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. It's a direction that I think we're going really, really quickly. I know I've only got a couple more minutes and there's like a million things that I would love to show, but I will show off just a couple of the what I think are kind of the coolest elements here. So if you've ever seen Solonis, Solonis is famous for being able to build, what we call the subway map, the process intelligence graph. What is so neat here is so we can pull together all of these different objects in order to show the complex process of how software gets built. Everything from builds to commits to initiatives to pull requests, et cetera, et cetera. But what's really cool here is we can now show where the work is being passed from humans to agents and the agentic workflow. So we can show where a task might get passed to an agent, where the LLM starts, where it begins thinking, where it begins planning, whether it needs to call other tools through MCP, whether it's able to process completely or whether it needs to go back and request input from a human, and then ultimately how we get to the endpoint. And so once we've got all this layered together inside of the process context graph, we can start to compare what does the workflow look like when it's humans and agents with no human in the loop, human only workflows, or workflows with are completely human workflows. We can also start to be able to do some really interesting things. Sven, I know a number of the customers that we talk to get really excited about setting up a process adherence monitor. So being able to flag and call out anytime, for instance, the development is starting without a first draft being done by an LLM. So being able to understand sort of where and how are the agents actually being used in terms of in terms of what's happening here. The one other thing maybe I'll call
And
out really
maybe Eric,
quickly.
on that
Yeah.
point, one of the really interesting aspects is it's about change. And so if your change communication is manual, then that by definition limits your velocity and your ability to drive change on an aggressive timeline. And so this is no longer SDLC specific, but the Solonis platform is able to basically understand when these deviations occur. We can set thresholds for pattern deviation, and then we can automatically inform individual developers. We can inform Scrum leads or team leads, of pattern violations that they need to be focusing on first. And so we make the ability to communicate what needs to change really easy, and we focus in on the most impactful elements of deviation measurement. And I think that's really critical as you're trying to transition 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people to a new way of working.
That's exactly right, Sven. The one other call out I'll make real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Rob for questions because I don't want to I don't want to short circuit that. But as we think about the overall process telemetry in terms of analyzing how well the transition to agentic is going, understanding the move of cycle time is really important. Similarly important is understanding rework rate and understanding how rework is changing in the context of moving to agent native. And so as we think about the concept of spec-driven development, I mean, just even in the name, the specification becomes unbelievably important as we're thinking about as we're thinking about making sure that we're optimizing the process. And so being able to predict things like, where do we have risk in the process? How well do we expect, that spec to ultimately be able to move through the process completely before, without necessarily encountering rework becomes really, really important here. And so one of the things that we're actually doing is we're analyzing every set of requirements that's coming through inside of inside of the product. And so we can understand things like what is the likelihood that this particular set of requirements is going to end up needing to be redone based on how complete or how complex the specification is. And so this becomes a forward indicating predictor of things like rework within the process so that we can have a check and a balance and some governance around how we're executing on something like spec-driven. All right, Sven, was there anything I missed that you wanted me to show off? Ben, you still with me? All right. Well, I am going to assume that silence is means that we made it through. And if we have anything come up in questions, I can always pull this back up and we can always answer some questions. So, Robert, I think you've been taking questions from the audience, and so let us know if there's anything you want us to answer.
Yeah, I think we have one more slide
Oh,
before we
thanks,
get to
man.
questions. It really relates around, what do we recommend? So we recommend really kind of thinking about this as transitioning humans to new operating models. So technology is certainly a challenge, but moving humans and the behavior of process execution is arguably the bigger challenge. Ensuring how humans and agents follow your processes is really the critical challenge, especially as you define the new ways of working. And then the ability to really measure the performance. At the end of the day, inserting anything into your operational activities has to have a payback. Otherwise, there is no point in doing it generally. And so the ability to have that cost control lens always on is something that we recommend very strongly. And then this is a journey. Like I said, virtually every CIO and CTO that we have engaged with knows that this is the journey that they're on. It is a continuously improving journey for this hybrid workforce, and with that, if any of what we described, is you, then we should have a conversation. And maybe Rob, now I turn over to you to see if there are any questions that we have from the audience.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is I think we've all come to understand that the ability to dashboard and do analysis is fairly straightforward. It's creating the data model and the context model that's actually the really hard part. And so as we think about pulling in the unified context model and the unified data model, there's typically a couple key things that we need to overlay and combine together in sort of a new and interesting way to be able to do this. The first is the process logs and the data from the systems of record that we've been using for years to build software. So this is Jira, ADO, GitHub, GitLab, Circle CI, Jenkins, these sorts of tools up and down the software stack. We oftentimes see that any customer of a non-trivial size, any customer of a non-trivial size is going to have multiple instances of these tools. And by the way, we know that they're usually going to have multiple different processes. So there's going to be some teams that are going to be using Scrum, some teams that are going to be using Kanban, some teams that are going to be using, whatever, all kinds of different processes. They're going to have different ways of thinking about their process. So whatever platform you're using to interrogate needs to be flexible, it needs to be extensible, and it needs to be able to handle those sorts of requirements elegantly, which is a pretty rare thing out there. The other key thing, and then the other key element to this is being able to intelligently bring in at a fine grained resolution level, the log files of the actual agentic system. So this is your quad code, your codec, and it's also important to be able to do this in a way that doesn't blow up their performance or burn a ton of code. And so we've created open source packages that allow us to basically process mine or agent mine all of the common coding tools that organizations are using within the SDLC. And it allows us to pull these two sets of data together, the data from the systems of record and the data from the agentic coding tools. It allows us to pull together and get that unified data model that I showed you just a minute. Yeah, it's such a good question, Rob. So there's maybe two or three ways to kind of skin this cat to talk about this. Where we want so let's zoom all the way out, right? At a board level, at an executive level within an organization, we want to be able to understand what are we building, when are we going to get it, and how much is it costing? Like those key questions haven't really changed. Whether there's humans, agents, hybrid, whatever, building the software, it doesn't matter. Like we still need to be able to answer those questions. Um, for the last 20, 25 years, the how much is it costing has, to a first approximation, been driven by one variable, which is the human beings within the process that are ultimately like building the thing out. And so if we wanted to understand, a rough approximation of how much does it cost to build a feature, how much does it cost to execute on an initiative, et cetera, we needed to be able to get to a rough approximation of like how many humans worked on it, what percentage of their time, and how many humans, how much did those humans cost, right? And that could be hourly rates, could be fully burden rates. There's a couple different ways to kind of get that data into the data model. The next piece of this is now humans may or may not be, they're certainly not 100% of the cost anymore. They may be 50% of the cost, they may be 75, they may be 25 or even 15, right? And so in order to understand the cost model around software that we're building, we need to be able to understand both the human side of how the software is getting built, and then also the number of tokens and how much those tokens are costing. Well, this is really difficult to do because absent the context model that I just showed you, most organizations don't have a handle. They don't have any way to even approximate something like token spend per task, token spend per initiative, token spend per epic, any of that kind of thing. And so if you don't have that basic data breakdown, then it becomes impossible to get to that basic analysis, and then much less understand, is cycle time going up or down, or rework rate going up or down, and so what's the ROI that's coming from this. So as you think about that context layer and some of the stuff that I showed earlier, the sort of key takeaway I think at the executive level is, once you have these different data feeds integrated into one context graph, it allows us to query and be able to answer the question, whether that question is, are the are the agents making my cycle time go up or down? Are the agents making my rework rate go up or down? Am I spending more or less to get to a level of productivity? And how much is it now costing me to like keep the lights on, to run things, all this other kind of stuff? So all of these questions that executives have, is they try to make the decisions and the strategic allocation decisions around their business. Fundamentally, it comes down to having that kind of context layer so that we can then query and we can understand, and we can make informed decisions around
Okay. Yeah, I mean, another great question, or a set of questions. Celonis has been getting this for the better part of a decade. Do I clean up my system environment and standardize my nomenclature and taxonomy before I apply Celonis process intelligence or process mining? The answer is, you apply it yesterday. We are able to basically reconcile how you are currently using these systems. As Eric said, there are teams that are using multiple instances of Jira or ADO. They may have multiple definitions of what is a bug. And one of the things that Bloomfilter has done very effectively is the ability to use technology and various fuzzy logic capabilities to automate the process of creating a harmonized view into how work gets done. And so the people that get the best benefit, or the highest benefit, are people that are trying to move towards standardization. Right, like we can impact their business opportunity significantly. And I think maybe that's one of the things that is always on the mind of people. Great, I heard a webinar, I saw some slides, I may have seen a demo system. All this is kind of prepackaged, right? Very little things can go wrong, even though this is a live webinar. But one of the things that we've been able to do very effectively is engage in a show and prove it environment. So if you think that your data sets are complicated, and we will not be able to very quickly kind of show you how work is done in your environments with your data, come give us a call. We're able to take flat file data and very quickly basically show you how we can do what we just claimed that we can do. Right, like that's typically a good first step to kind of kick the can to see if this is real and whether or not it's applicable to you. And then from there, the integrations into your systems, we call these patterns. So we're looking for these combinations of systems that make up patterns, and then the UI assets we refer to as recipes. So basically, which personas are you looking to enable? Is it the executive views? Is it the team lead, scrum master views? Is it developer view? And then, of course, at the heart and soul of what our capability is and does, the good old business analyst, right? The person that can very flexibly and dynamically interrogate, how work gets done, to find these hidden patterns of inefficiency and insight, and then use the platform to close the gap from insight to action. Because at the end of the day, what do we all get paid for is to affect a positive change in outcome. And that is really what we're doing. We're just doing it in a smarter, faster, more efficient way than you can going into a conference room with sticky note workshops. Don't do that. Come talk to us.
Yeah, I'll just put a finer point on what Sven said. We're usually from data availability to a first look in about 5 or maybe 10 business days. So it's usually 1 to 2 weeks to get to a first look of the data. Um, your data is not too imperfect to get value out of it. Like we see this all the time. And the other thing that I'll add to it is, as the father of 2 lovely young daughters, who I am constantly asking them to clean up their room. If there's one thing that I have become absolutely convinced of in human nature, it is that there will never be hygiene or cleanliness absent observability. And so, with all due respect to the argument, if you think that you're going to get to a perfect process with perfect hygiene, lacking the observability and the measures and the telemetry, it just never works that way. And what we see from customers is when they institute the observability, it then drives the sense of urgency to get to the hygiene that we all need to be able to run and scale in this brave new world of AI. This stuff's no longer optional. It's increasingly becoming mandatory and foundational if we want to leverage AI to accelerate our business processes, which I think for every boardroom in the world is the key question of the next 5 years. How do we leverage AI to accelerate our critical business processes? And that really starts with having this context.
Right back to the 3 horizons. Make the process observable, move beyond KPIs, drive adherence, to those future state target models, and then ultimately unlock the autonomous process optimization horizon that drives exponential value. Yeah, I think we covered this. So if you were interested, come talk to us. All right, that's the best way for knowledge exchange to happen. You can reach out to us to book a demo. Reach out to Cole Newman. He is great at facilitating getting the right people into the right meeting environment. And thank you for your time and engagement today. And those that are listening to this, after the live session has concluded, thank you very much for engaging in this content. We love telling the story, and we're excited to be part of this journey. Thank you, Eric, for a fun conversation.